This is R&B with Russ and Blake. We have a guest again. Thank you for listening to us. You are not going to regret. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome back to R&B Podcast, Rhythm and Blessings guest series with Russ and Blake and special guest, another family member, Blake. Not me, Blake, but Russ's brother, Blake.
Hello. Yes, we have the same name. It could be confusing. I'm Blake Davis.
Yes.
You're gonna have to
Oh, hello.
closer into that.
I'm Blake Davis. I'm Russ's older brother. I've been doing this for, how old are you?
I'm 27, just turned 27.
years now.
The older brother thing.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, we appreciate you joining us, being our second guest. First guest was my wife, and then having Russ's brother on follow up, I think is really important, just for people to kind of understand where we come from and a little bit more of our priorities and the people we care about the most. So thank you for taking the time out to join us, bro.
Yeah, and on this podcast a lot, we've talked about the concept of like how iron sharpens iron, and the people around us have really helped us become who we are, right? So with Blake talking to his wife last episode, me having my brother on now, you're an integral part in, my studies and my growth, and also athletically, just everything that we've been doing for, like you said, 27 years.
Yeah, for sure. It's weird, my time as Russ's brother and growing up, we've been 5 years apart. So, growing up, we were real close at home, but Russ's social life was far from me. And he's done this on his own the whole time, to a certain extent from what was, kind of put together and put into the curriculum of life that we had at home. But he's got his own thing, and I'm just honored to be here and to see his progress. This is I got 17 episodes. That's big time.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
For sure.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, and we've talked about before like mentorship, and I know how you say we almost two separate social lives. We went to different high schools, different friend groups, all that different stuff. You went to a Catholic high school, I went to a public school, and the common denominator though is you being willing to pass the knowledge of what you learned beforehand, right? Like going 5 years early and kind of paving that way, and then being like, hey, I see you're an individual, but this is just a little bit of tools that'll help you out, like a book that'll help orient you, or just some words that'll help motivate you. And that's been huge. It's like the perfect touch. It wasn't like overbearing. It was just like a little bit of motivation when it was needed.
Good. Yeah. Well, hey, we're gonna keep on doing it now.
Yes, sir.
We did it without effort back then. We just did it on some Love Brothers stuff. But now we're big boys, and that's what we're talking about today.
Right, definitely.
Basically, you want me to introduce the topic?
Sure,
Yeah.
please.
So basically, we can go into this. Kind of what we're hitting on today is that we have life problems, and when we kind of deal with these problems, we have two states. There's a immaturity or an unconscious, and then a mature or a conscious position from which we see problems. We kind of touched on it earlier. We're talking about, sports, school, the things that we did all the way up until high school. And then we graduated. Basically, we were brought along, and we didn't know what we were overcoming, but we overcame. And then life gives us more things that we can deal with. That's still fulfilling, But at this point, we know how hard it is. And so we have to take a position of a conscious position. We have to be deliberate, and we put forth towards our overcoming our solutions.
Right.
Yeah, and you mentioned that as almost like a sign of maturity, knowing how it gets more difficult, but also knowing that you're having these utilities to help guide you through what's going to be inevitably difficult.
Sure. So utilities, yeah, that's kind of what we're looking at. You have help and guidance throughout your progress, right? You have people that are going to be there along with you to help you get through stuff, and that kind of brings us to a key point here. basically the name of the game, the title of our discussion is Trust Falls with Demons.
Right.
Right. And the demons that we have are the problems, the sub problems. So, you know, when you're playing basketball, your demons are, you know, I'm too short. So what do you do? Eat your Wheaties or whatever.
Yeah. That's a huge problem.
Or you hit the gym.
Yeah, or you get big.
Yeah.
You develop the strength that can be used for your individual makeup, because there really is no too short, too small, or anything in basketball if you attack it with your individual talents. Like Earl Boykins, right? I mean, he's like 5'4", NBA player.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta work with what you have. We're all blessed. We're blessed in different ways. We have different gifts, and we have to tap into those gifts. And like you said, with the maturity, sometimes it's almost like the immaturity allows us to tap into those gifts without really being aware of it.
Yeah.
Just because we're so eager to approach difficulty, and it's almost because we don't know that there's consequences for failure at times. But we also don't realize that failure is necessary. But I know me personally, growing up, it's like as you overcome things, sometimes you get in a rhythm and you have this help that you don't really recognize of how much help it is, right? And then so you're overcoming these things, and you might neglect that. And then once that assistance is gone, but you're putting forth that same effort, and then you're more aware of how difficult it is, but you didn't realize you were overcoming these things with people kind of lifting you up along the way, then it makes you have to change up your game plan, right?
Yeah.
And that's where that maturity and that wisdom has to kick in for you to switch your approach, because it is more of a solo journey at some point, even though we still do have people we carry throughout the process. The adulthood facing those problems and issues and fears is a lot different than earlier in life.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
So Blake, when you say trust falls with demons, does that indicate that we have to have some trust in those, what you would call demons, those shortcomings, those things that can be hindrances?
The idea is that you kind of allow yourself to experience and understand the problem. You know, if the demons are the problem, you know, the demons equal what the problem is, then the idea is that you want to feel out the problem, just like you did when you were a kid.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you kind of go in unconsciously, but with the knowledge or the awareness that you have to come out, that you have to consciously identify your reason. And that's the big point that we got to realize, is that we have devices that we're going to consciously identify and then use. And we were talking about this earlier, where, you know, how do you know or how do you remember your reason? You know, how do you remember the tools that you use, you know, to overcome your stuff? You know, you growing up, you might have just had an uncle who lifted, you know, and he was short too. And you just did it.
Yeah.
But you didn't know why you did it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You understand?
And then later in life, you have to have a purpose.
Now you need to know why you do it.
Right, or else you're not going to keep doing it.
If that's, yeah.
So let me ask you, Blake, because I remember when I was like 18 years old, you gave me the book, The Power of Now, and you were like, hey, this is a good book to read just if you have some free time and you want to check out some good words, right?
And Russ gave me that book.
Right, and then I passed it to Blake, and I'm passing on to other people, like, this is some good stuff right here. This is some good motivation, a good way to kind of orient yourself in the world. What was your reason how'd you even stumble upon, like, starting to read and starting to care about, the deeper side of things?
Man, honestly, it would have been somebody probably passed along to me. So, that's just kind of how it came about. And, I jumped into it. And, I kind of had a episode there where, things were, kind of going away, where I wanted to, kind of grasp an understanding of how people, how mature beings get through life, right?
Mm-hmm.
How, I was in college, but I was aware that there was some type of, focus that I see in men, in my environment,
Mm-hmm.
So, I grabbed that and I jumped into it. And this idea of, being in the moment and trying to be in the moment consciously was something that grasped me pretty easily. I didn't try it, you know what I mean? I didn't try to make it a science or anything, but I definitely started, okay, I'm gonna stay up in this moment type of thing. But, I think you take it with a grain of salt.
Sure.
It's just more so developing the awareness,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
as
yeah.
kids, we are in the moment. We enjoy things just naturally.
Yeah.
But then we have so many more distractions and so many more goals at times or responsibilities as we get older that might take away from that focus.
Yeah.
And then it does have to be a little more intentional, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, when you were younger, you probably just naturally wanted to go outside and shoot jump shots and play basketball. And then one day you get an offer from Division I school and you go, every basketball player's dream, go D1 and get to the top of the mountain in our world. Did you still feel like through the college process, like you were still that kid who just loved basketball and you were doing it that same way?
I've always had that, that rhythm that, and honestly, it wasn't really until basketball became serious that I started to decipher between this, basketball being something serious and basketball being, just, the thing that I love that I do by myself that I just gravitated to, And that was good because that allowed me to see the difference and then to realize that, I could still love it and I could still, do it with reason. And that right there, honestly, we could probably go into a whole different podcast about that.
Yeah.
Taking what you love and then applying reason to it and using both. But, basically that's, a pretty concrete version of what we're talking about here.
Well, yeah. And when you talk about your reason, if you could think back to when you were like a freshman in college, going into this world of all these, great high level basketball players, how did you remember your reason? Because I just from my experience, I was JUCO and D2 and there were super hard days. I can only imagine if I was competing with some of the top athletes in our country.
Well, okay, so this is another point that we got to explicate here is that reason, you can get reason that's good and you can get reason that's bad. That you can get reason that doesn't help you deal with what you're trying to overcome at all. And so, basically, that's where the trust falls for me comes in because I was talking to Russ about this. When you see kind of when you're going into something, you're trying to figure it out, there's often experts, spiritual experts on all kinds of things of life, whether it's, taking care of a newborn baby, whether it's learning how to be a husband and a wife amongst friends. There's always seems to be somebody out there that's just like spiritually purposed to show everybody how to do these things. And, that element right there, I think is the best way to remember your reason, because you ain't never going to forget those people.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And they can show you the way. Your coach. You can go through your memory of coaches and mentors, your teachers from when you were a kid, and just in your memory, which a reflection is a key element, I would say, of this process.
Yes.
And you can explicate, you can synthesize all the most potent, tools to success that you gain throughout your life, and then you can bring them right back into whatever you're doing. You know what I'm saying? At that point. So I think that probably, if you think about it, the best way to remember, or at least one way, I'm not going to say the best, but I like it, is remembering the people along the way.
Yeah.
And then because you're just going, oh yeah, I remember he told me this. And it's like, it's going to stick in your mind like it's,
Yeah.
it's a part of you.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
I've never thought of that. And
Yeah.
it makes complete sense because as you say that, I start thinking in that way and I'm like, oh man.
Yeah.
It makes memories a lot more vivid if you think about the people that were involved along the way, especially if they help you realize something. Yeah.
And reflecting back on it, it's like they were placed there on purpose. You know, these people that I'm thinking of, like their spirit was great. They cared about what they were doing and they motivated me. And it's not like they were there for me. I was at like a camp or something with 100 other people, or I was on a team with 15 other people. It wasn't just for me, but in my reflection of it, it does feel like that person was placed there to like
Right.
help me grow.
Yeah.
The other thing is value. You value overcoming your problem,
Right.
or you value not having problems. So when you find a good reason, you say, I'm not gonna forget this.
Yeah.
That's a good one too. But what we kind of notice with that is that there's kind of two different types of people. You find people who give you reason that is how would I put it? They give you reason that can help you kind of in your kind of set foundations. Reason that's transferable throughout different life situations.
Yeah.
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 The coach tells you never quit. I'm not gonna start giving out mine.
No, I understand. We had a whole
favorite
episode.
stuff.
We had a whole episode about being proactive versus reactive, and I talked to them about how Deontay's dad, Coach KT, was like the first person to put that idea in my mind when I would go to Arizona Premier, Academy, in the weeknights, and he would just talk about these moves you're making. You need to enforce your will on offense and defense to make other people react to you.
And does that transfer to other situations of life?
Everything I do.
So yeah. So you can have reason like that, but then you can also have reason that's more detailed, situationally specific too. Don't use the incision tool next to the heart because
Yeah. Something
so,
technical. Right.
Something that's detailed for the situation. So you kind of have to be aware of that growing up and in your conscious pursuit. So you call it reasons of foundations and reasons of other some other type of reason.
So you brought up a little earlier that some reasons could like lead you the wrong way. And I'm not asking for you to give an example of yourself, but what's an example just for somebody where a reason given to them could have been like a distraction?
Well, I don't know. Drake says it the best. He say, fake friends write the wrong answers on the mirror for me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That Slumdog Millionaire. I think that kind of puts it in perspective.
Yeah.
And then, you can find examples on examples from there. But people, you got to be careful. People are competitive for no reason. And so...
and I think it's a key point. Like, we had an episode talking about coaching and what makes a good coach. And one thing I brought up is that usually it's a coach that's had some success in the game before he became a coach, whether that was like on a team. He couldn't have even been a bench player, but just his team was successful, or he felt like he was successful in the game first. So then he doesn't seek out the reward in his coaching.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And the reason I bring that up
That's
is...
a great point.
Yeah, and the reason I bring that up is because, if you're going to give people like guidance, like you can't want the admiration for it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because that will distort. You talk about people are competitive for no reason. I think it's because like you've experienced success in competition, right? We've experienced success in competition. So now we're down to be like, man, why does competition even matter? It's not that great. Some people never tasted it.
Yeah.
So they're still trying to win.
Yeah.
And they haven't figured out that all those wins are fleeting and they're not really going to fulfill you. And it's truly going to be like the philosophy you take from it that matters.
Yeah.
But there has to be a way for somebody to get to that point without tasting the success, because some people just either are robbed of an opportunity from injury or whatever life situation happens, or if they make a mistake themselves, or where it just doesn't have the opportunity. But later in life, if they want to be that presence to someone, how do you think that they would still achieve that?
Well, I think sometimes it's either success attained or like the world humbles you with some type of tragedy. I think that's another route to get to that point where you're like, hey, why are we competing for this? Because, something happened that made me have a different perspective on this.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a short time we're living, or, someone I cared about isn't here, like those types of things.
Yeah. I would touch on kind of we were talking about too, the degree of reason. That's like kind of our start point here. And you might see, some people need more or less reason. Some people kind of resolve whatever their problem is in a situation pretty easily. My cat died. Why did my cat die? Because it was old age. Okay, that's good enough for me. Other people, why did my cat die? Well, that, like we were saying earlier, that star up there called him back into his place. There's
Some people are like,
different-
I accidentally left the door open and my cat got ran over.
Yeah.
That's where you are more like, oh my gosh, because
Yeah.
I was involved now.
Yeah, and then you need more reason. Like, why was I?
So dumb.
Yeah, and
people
then
just
how
do
do I? And
Different level of grief when you feel like involved with it. And some people, even if they weren't directly involved, they find a way in their head to make it seem like it's their fault, right?
yeah.
I think that happens a lot of times. Like, oh, it should have been me, or like, oh, I could have done this to change the outcome, right?
Yeah.
And like I said, even when you're so disconnected, it's like the fact that you were disconnected, all of a sudden it's your fault. And then, so I kind of question, how do you get people to cope properly and not feel so connected to that experience of loss, even though it does affect them, but to help someone realize that when it's cause and effect, unless you kill that person, that has nothing to do with you. And you still have to be able to continue with your journey.
Yeah. That's, I don't know, for me, I would consider, suggesting that some people, need more reason than others for whatever reason. And that's a lot of reason, right? But going back to what Russ is saying, the problem for some people, if the problem is being a good basketball player, then, their reason could be, I need to win a championship to be a good basketball player. And then if they can't win that championship, then they're distraught. You might say that that's a greater degree of reason than, if I learn how to dribble, I'll be fine. Type of a thing. So that's kind of where I'm going at with the degree of reason.
Sure.
And then being able to free yourself from whatever your trap is of, attainment.
Yeah. Your goal.
So some, coaches, if they feel like they haven't become a great basketball player, they might, just need more reason to fulfill that problem in their life than another coach. And,
And some people,
I don't see anything wrong with it, as long as they're, going for and they're listening to good people along the way. I don't see any problem with it. Degrees of reason. I think there's experts on experts on experts that have the proper details to help somebody, resolve whatever their discrepancy is with the situation.
So you're linking reason with validation a little bit. Like what goal is it that you can get to, and like what's your purpose? Why you're gonna do this to get to that point, basically?
Yeah, now you're getting into it. So like why you have to, I don't know. That's who, what, when, where, why, how.
Yeah, all of
There's
the
a whole bunch
explanation
of different
behind
heads
it.
to reason now.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now,
and that's what we have to keep going through.
If
we have
you
to keep
need
going
it.
through it. If you need it. That's interesting.
Oh yeah, no, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Because like you said, some people do get through these things without having all of that defined reason. And they can still be successful through whatever it is they're doing.
Yeah, man. I find a whole bunch of people out there who's, 35 years old, stocky, eating a 7-Eleven burrito, talking about I'm a baller with a Allen Iverson shirt on. And, you take him to the court and he's just, he'll dribble a couple times, throw it over his head and he's like, ta-ta, ta-da, and it's like, That's just all people. Some people need.
Yeah, that's true. That's
and
enough
he's
to be.
fulfilled.
Yeah,
and it ain't no problem.
you're right. I think that brings us into how this can be translated, because you have traveled the world. You've been to how many different countries? Do you know off the top of your head, like how many different countries you've been to?
No. Let's see here. I'll do a quick count. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
9.
Yeah.
So 9 different countries, and
In less than 10 years.
in less than 10
yeah,
years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's huge. And, that's what I kind of wanted to ask you, because as you traveled around, since you were focused on studying like coping and reason in people's lives, I'm sure you saw a lot of different symbols or different ways that these people in different cultures were having their daily reason and, what they described as their purpose for living and being fulfilled.
Yeah. I think, I think everybody can kind of imagine this. It's, the discrepancy of people's their aspirations, the degree and the degree to which they aspire towards success. However that's put. Some places are very farm driven, agriculturally bound, and to sustain the economy, while others are like America are more elaborate, industrial, technological.
Right.
And I think when you kind of look at that, you can see like a cultural characteristic where some places, culturally speaking, people are, okay with just, waking up and, doing whatever
Tend to the house.
Yeah, the task for
do the
day.
farm.
Yeah.
Not too much extra ambition past what they do daily.
Straight up.
Yeah.
And kind of like the guy with the Allen Iverson jersey, they have fulfillment just because that's who they're trying to be.
Yeah. So in that respect, I think the best way that you would look through the literature on the psychological literature and define what we're talking about is, the difference between the individualistic and the collectivistic cultures.
Yeah.
You kind of cross-factor individualistic and collectivistic cultures with, success attainment and, fulfillment in the day-to-day process. That those 4 factors can kind of create the foundation from which discussions can explode.
Yeah. And you've been keeping us on track here talking about reason, and through your studies and travels, I know you were developing a book. What was the title of the book that you created?
Oh man, it's a big old long title. It's huge. It's a dissertation style research project on emotion focused coping. That's the grain of the title. Sure. And essentially it's a qualitative approach. So, what I'm doing is using a qualitative research model which seeks to extract the kind of the more detailed, unorganized elements and concepts of any topic.
Right. Other than just like the statistics and the number models, it's the quality.
Yeah, the quality. But so it's a qualitative model to further understand coping. But coping is, it occurs emotionally and through problem solutions. We've been talking about problem solutions. My book is on emotions, which is a whole different deal. Whereas, if the problem still exists, how can you still do your day-to-day routines and still remain, oriented towards getting, your life accomplish so you can survive type of thing.
Right. Like really big problems, like the problems that can cause people to stay inside or not go about their life.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. So the idea with the emotions is how do we have devices that are emotional devices that can calm us
Mm-hmm.
and basically, get us centered while lingering problems still exist. But the idea is to explicate and synthesize emotion and all of its parts.
What is an emotional device?
Oh, for instance, you can use vengeance. Vengeance is one problem of emotion that individuals might, develop different devices from religion. If you can look through a biblical text and you realize, all right, God says, vengeance is the Lord's. Okay, now you start to use these belief systems to deal with your emotion. Um, you know, as a device, and it's something that you become conscious of and that you realize works. That's an example. You got to read the book because there's a lot of stuff in it, and
Right.
it goes, they're few and far between, but that's
No, I totally understand. I totally understand. Realizing that it works is the biggest thing. Because some people, like, they'll talk about the tool that they want. It could be
yeah.
journaling. It could be, going on walks, scenery, all these other tools that people feel like they develop. But believing that that's really going to work and believing that after I do this, I'm going to have, right, found the feeling.
Yeah. It is interesting how important it is to just believe that what you're doing has purpose behind it. Because you can have a reason, but if you just state a reason and it's not true to you, then it's kind of arbitrary. It ends up being insignificant. So, as we do come up on these inevitable issues throughout life, we just have to have something that keeps us grounded, that does have a intrinsic value just to us as an individual, and have to realize that these things that we overcome, yes, it may affect the collective, but if we don't understand and engage and prioritize this individual effort, then the collective is gonna overwhelm us, and you're not gonna be able to overcome whatever it is, because it just has to be something that's also addressed and like I said, prioritized.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see you have written down here on the board death of new life. Can you explain what that is?
Okay, so that's basically explicating what we were talking about earlier, where if you are overcoming an old life, and then you're coming into a new life to resolve your issues, but you're getting over whatever your adolescent problems were, and then you're jumping into your new life.
Right. So we were talking more so that kind of division between adolescence and adulthood, how adulthood is kind of starting a new life, basically. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of people in that transition feel misunderstood, right? Like a lot of young people, they start coming up, they're like, oh, people don't understand me anymore. When I was in high school, it seemed like people understood who I was, and they got the things I was talking about, they felt me. And as I started to transition into this new life, like, I'm not understood by a majority of my peers anymore. How do you think people go about dealing with that? Because that can make you feel very isolated, and I know a lot of people have felt that.
So you think trying to socialize yourself and become kind of get over your problems within a unit
Mm.
That's what you're getting at, right?
Well, is that a way to combat it? You're saying go find a social group that feels you, like a new social group?
I don't know. That's a good point. I think those are two key sides to the spectrum in discussing psychological treatment. Is when you start to bring in other people, you're dealing with a whole new problem because you know people one of the key concepts in the literature on this is found in overcoming problems of suicide.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a friend or a relative who commits suicide, you've got to basically deal with it by you know social your social comrades, your social companions they can bring you down or they can lift you up. And a lot of times people they start blaming each other because suicide is something where, like we were speaking about earlier, it's difficult to ascertain where you put the blame. You know what I'm saying? So in one respect, individualistic or independent solutions are you know what you need to resolve, but on the other end of the spectrum, you also need your social counterparts. And then with that, you get into who helps you out. If people are giving you good advice or good reason, or if they're giving you bad reason, that's a social consideration. But then at the same time, you also just have people who kind of comfort you,
Yeah.
keep you motivated, keep you fed, keep you whatever. Your friends, people can just be there with you.
Sure.
So that's something else that you would want to talk about or explore.
Yeah. People of importance can have different roles in a lot of different ways, right?
And if you get into the book, that's one of the main points because you want to have there's the book. So when it's difficult to kind of decipher the particulars of reason that the book outlines, but it tries to stay centered in the Christian text and from Christian considerations, but it also explores considerations of alternative religions. But from the Christianity perspective, you've got a church body, and essentially to deal with problems, you go at them with your spiritual counterparts.
Yeah.
And that's basically where, if you're gonna look at the situation from a social standpoint and you consider it from a religious perspective, then you're going to you're going to begin to realize that community is important. But then if you want to dig a little deeper, you're going to also see that the Christian text says that the different body parts are no more or less greater than other body parts. So these ideas, just to go back to what you were referring to earlier with the emotional side or any type of emotional device, basically what I'm trying to do is to get from people they're the reasons that they employ these religious or whatever understandings in order to resolve their emotions. So, in that situation, might find, people are like, hey, you know what? When I was in high school, I tried to do everything on my own, and I realized that I had, a dog that I really loved, but I also had a best friend who lived across town, and I had to go hang out with her every whatever. And the only way that I could deal with my conflicting situation was to use help from somebody else.
Sure.
In that sense, you can realize that it's it's an emotional situation because
I'm just wondering, as you're saying this, do you think that looking through the scientific literature and then trying to kind of make a case for some more religious and spiritual things as what can be more helpful, have you found a conflict there? Or does it seem to you like the idea of psychology is actually like synonymous or goes hand in hand with those religious, spiritual devices that people use?
Well, the thing about psychology is that it's very, they try to remain scientific,
Mm-hmm.
which means they try to,
Empirical, like.
empirical. They try to keep things that are consistent, and they they overlook concepts that nobody can prove, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the purpose of the book, is to dig into various religious teachings and discover the teachings at their elemental level, to create something that people can do, that they can consciously say, this works to, resolve my emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically the emotion.
Because that's really what we're battling with every day is how we feel about stuff. You
Right.
know,
Mm-hmm.
that's really the only thing. It's how you feel about it. If you're gonna face a fear, or your jealousy, if you're not gonna act on it, all of these problems that we have are coming from how we feel about everything. So I definitely understand that.
True that.
Mhm.
Yeah. It drives our decisions throughout the day.
Yeah, and how we feel about it. That's the thing, across religions, you're probably going to find a pretty consistent explanation for feelings, vengeance, jealousy, greed, these things.
Mm.
But when you begin to dive into religions and the reasons that they give for these problems and the solutions that they have, it's a whole different game. Christianity tells you to sell all your possessions, if you want to experience the kingdom of heaven. Well, then, the next question is, why does that work? How does that work? How can you create an experiment lab and control variables?
Hey, you really can't.
And to reproduce.
You can't measure if like selling your possessions produces the kingdom of heaven.
Can you or can't you? That's the question.
I think,
But
yeah.
scientifically they don't. They try not to see it, but if you break it down far enough, I think you can.
Yeah.
I think you can. And actually, before science and the empirical system was created, they the church, the Catholic Church, was the foundation of the world's more educated, or at least popularity, from a popularized perspective.
Mm-hmm.
They held the, they held the light, and then after the Renaissance era, people started to turn more into this scientific approach.
Yeah, postmodernism is what they call it in philosophy.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and that's true. And it's interesting to me to see how people are juggling this, because they know how they feel, and then they know what they're taught, and then they can see history, and those are like the things that they're juggling to try to figure out how they're going to orient themselves now. Right. So you went to Egypt and you saw pyramids, right? And I know the other day when we were talking, you kind of said that you wanted to bring up the symbolism of the desert and what that means. Do you want to talk about, in your perspective, what like the symbolism of the desert is and why that's been a motif throughout history?
No. The desert, we're gonna. That's something different.
Okay. That's something completely different.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's something different.
Okay.
But if you want to get into like, inconsistencies of cultures, is that what you're saying? Like, explain it again, because I kind of got lost there with the desert.
Sure. Because we know in the Bible and in a lot of religious and cultural texts, there's a significance of time in the desert. And that's like, can be a true story, but it's also symbolism.
Sure. That's a good point. Actually, I don't know, man. The desert, if you're looking at what we were just talking about a second ago with seclusion and, social presence, I think the desert kind of explains a little bit of how people can allow themselves to be independent in their, search for a reason and their search to resolve problems.
Mm-hmm.
You see Jesus go to the desert and he's dealing with the devil, and you have angels who are obviously on standby, waiting for him to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
Why weren't the angels there the whole time?
That's a good question. I never thought about that.
He had to do it by himself.
Yeah.
So I think the desert. I think there's definitely something to it with seclusion and monks and religious individuals for centuries have been going out to the desert, to caves and stuff. Yeah.
And in our day and age in 2023, it takes a lot of courage to put yourself in the desert, right? It takes a lot of courage to put yourself in a maybe isolated state where you're going to learn more, because we're taught to be afraid of that place. Honestly, our mainstream teachings and our media and everything kind of teaches us to be afraid of this so-called desert, the so-called like individual trek where you're there without a lifeline and you got to figure it out.
Yeah.
Because that's where you find faith. That's where you find your like spiritual mentor, right? That's where you find the help that is here with you. The Story of the Alchemist is a book that a lot of people have read, and that's like the similar story of trusting your omens and these different types of things. People find a lot of, purpose in that. What do you think, Blake?
Yeah, that's a good analogy to make with the feeling of being deserted,
Right.
being alone. There's actually research that shows loneliness is it negatively impacts your health. So actually feeling alone, I feel like is the more correct way to put that, because clearly people can accomplish a lot being alone if they have their reason, they have their purpose, and they have that drive, and they have that internal understanding of why they're alone and what they're supposed to be doing there. But
that's a good point.
from a physical level, there is actually research that shows the benefit of having companion and assistance and a social network and being that level of interaction as well. But I think it's very easy to make any situation either positive or negative. We've seen a lot of people come out of what looks like an awful situation and turn it into something beautiful. And we've seen a lot of people come out of what looked like a beautiful situation and then it ends in something awful. So it really does lie in the hands of the individual to to really manifest what that destiny is going to be, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's definitely some, in, realizing, kind of what you can give, when you're, alone, you realize your strengths and you can take that back to help other people. Um, but yeah, understanding why, you're in seclusion is probably a very, important point because, if you don't know why you're secluded, you might feel,
Hopeless.
Hopeless.
Yeah,
Hopeless.
yeah, unguided and things like that. So
Like you were left alone, So in a lot of ways, the idea that you're left alone is almost like an illusion. You talked about how like the angels were on standby,
yeah,
but nobody's ever truly left
mm-hmm.
on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be an older, when you were talking about how the church was kind of more the center of education and thought, that might have made more sense than it does now, where we're in a very physical, material mindset where literally if someone's not around us, we're alone, and in a more abstract way, we're never alone.
And if you think of like the concept of the oneness of the world and one love, and we all come from the center nucleus, the objects around us, the animals around us, all of that has to be taken into consideration if you really want to define yourself being alone. We think of alone not having other humans around us and being able to interact and have these social conversations, but your presence in this world means a lot more than you being able to just speak to someone sitting next to you.
Sure. And it's interesting because if we take that story in Genesis in the Bible, before Adam's rib was taken, before Adam's rib was taken and Eve was created, like Adam was technically alone. He was technically isolated, even though he had the other creations of God around him. He was by himself for a little bit. And that's, I don't know, just interesting kind of tidbit.
Yeah.
It's interesting that's in there for a little bit of time. It was just this one dude. And he was out here connected.
Yeah, he was still guided by God, though.
Right. And that's how religion can be such a strong advantage for someone in not ever really feeling alone, having that connection with God, And, some people are religious and still feel alone, They're like, God, why aren't you here with me, helping me deal with this? So it really is your perspective and all of these tools that we have. Again, somebody can hold that tool and not know what to do with it, right?
Yeah.
But there's so much power in whatever tool you wield. It's just how you're going to put it to work.
Yeah. And, that brings us to kind of the last point here on our board, which is to overcome discomfort or stress.
Sure.
Vital.
Yeah. So when we're looking at, these trust falls and we're seeing that we want to gain reason so that we can deal with a problem, like, trying to be a new father or something. The problem produces stress. All right. And so we have to understand that like stress is actually the problem, because otherwise, you may not feel, like anything there's no problem. Like honestly, if you just think about it, the only thing that suggests that there's a problem is the stress.
True.
Okay, so that's what that's another key point of the discussion is that the reason that we're trying to develop is used to overcome the stresses that we have just that deal with whatever our situation is. We overcome the stress, then we overcome the problem, and that right there is basically the essence and the underlying. I hope that doesn't kill our But anyways,
Mm-hmm.
the underlying, reason, or the underlying, we're using reason a lot. I'm trying to find a different word, but basically that's all I'm saying. The reason that I studied emotion focused coping instead of problem focused coping is because emotion focused coping allows you to deal with the stress until the problem is solved. So solving the problem gets rid of the stress too, but you also want to mitigate the stress until you overcome the problem, because the stress can keep you from solving the problem.
But it is necessary too, right?
That's what some people say.
Yeah, because scientifically, growth happens under stress.
Yeah.
There has to be change, and change is uncomfortable. And whether it's just us in our own mind trying to, cope with the changing world around us, or these stages of life, or physical stress of being in the gym, breaking down your body so it can grow back stronger. All those areas of stress, there has to be balance. There has to be preparation. There has to be the capability of overcoming that load of stress that you're taking. But to progress and grow and be better than previously, that stress does have to be present to an extent, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
So like the stress that exactly, we know stress is good in a lot of different ways, and so the stress that you're kind of trying to attack is like when it becomes hazardous, right?
Yeah, when it becomes hazardous. And two, if we're talking about the problem of life is death, and that's right there where we're saying death of a new life. Trust falls, the key problem is death. That's two different points. The key problem is death. The sub problems are like, the problems in life that are problems of our sub, efforts towards life. So, you try to play basketball. You want to. It's a situation that allows you to feel life. So basically, with that, if I'm if I'm dealing with a sub problem, then the stress of death is still there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, and that's where anxiety and when I say death, I think more so is the stress of non-life. Okay, and I say that because I don't want to get too far into it, but there's a perspective from which Sigmund Freud suggests that death can't be conceptualized. So it's more so where people feel anxious because they're not living. So the anxiety is maintained, I would say, because people want eternal life and they feel conflicted.
Yeah.
But anxiety and sub problems, I think, can be overcome.
Yes, because that's not the real problem, right? Like the sub
It's
problem
not the
isn't
real problem. Yeah, and it's something that you can master.
Yeah,
And
totally.
if you master, I think your anxieties can be decreased, in a healthy way.
For sure. Like, for example, there's just that big fight, Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia, right? There's 50,000 people, whatever, in this arena watching them. And for a lot of people, that would be like crippling anxiety. One of them has to get beat up in front of a whole bunch of people. Now, you can like master the emotions of having that crowd and having to perform, because that's just a sub problem. You're not dying. You know what I mean? You're not going to die. But you're going to experience supreme nervousness because you have to go perform in front of masses, but you're not, going to die in that situation. And that's something that, as like performance psychology goes, they talk about a lot, because you're experiencing like the little emotions of like a tiny death, but you're not actually getting out of here. And you get what I'm saying?
Well, devil's advocate, you could die.
Sure. Yeah,
Boxing, you could not come out of the ring, right? So those guys have to build up this level of confidence to where, yes, they're doing any task in front of 50,000 people, but it is also a situation where they could die.
Yeah.
So
that's true.
you know, they don't think they're gonna die because they think they're gonna win. That's why they're there. I'm gonna win. I'm gonna make this money.
Yes.
But if you put me in that situation against Tank,
Right.
I don't know what the outcome's gonna be. I could be thinking in that situation, I'm not gonna make it out of here.
Yeah.
So that's that whole nother level of anxiety.
And I guess, you know, that ties into your point because it's like they don't think they're going to die.
Yeah.
They think they're going to go perform. But like the greater problem in life is like none of us can think we're not going to die.
Yeah.
It's impossible
Right,
for you to
right.
just think you're not going to die.
At the end of it all, right?
whenever
Maybe
that-
not situational, but yeah, the whole journey as a whole.
Well, from Sigmund Freud's perspective, if you think about any debilitating effects upon a person when living, the idea is in my book is that people are just caught in a state of dissonance, and if you can't conceptualize death, basically you're just creating some illusion and then fearing it.
That's exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
That's exactly what's happening.
And that's Sigmund Freud's point is like, how can you conceptualize death? Because the human spirit is something that is living, and how can it expect to die?
Yeah. All it
And
can,
that's once you get there, you can't go any further.
right. And that's where the emotion comes into play because it can't conceptualize death, but it can be afraid of it.
The unknown, the fear of the unknown.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
That's different. You
Okay.
know, if you can't conceptualize it, you know, how can you fear it? What are you fearing? Are you fearing, you know, the emotions that other people have towards, you know, you failing? And does that make you, you know, fearful?
Yeah.
Well, I think in relation to death, you know, something that you don't know what it looks like, you don't know what you're facing, but same way you don't know what's behind this door. Like for some reason I have a feeling there's something behind this door. Like there's no steps behind this door, it's dark. I don't know what I'm walking into.
Sure. But, you know, yeah. That's a long talk. you know?
Oh yeah.
But, you know, what's the boogeyman until somebody tells you that he's a bad guy?
Right. It's like the Scooby-Doo thing, right? Like you're all scared of him, but you rip the mask off, and that's Frank. Like, we know him, you know. And that's why that was always a huge revelation at the end of the Scooby-Doo shows, because it's like we were afraid of this thing the whole time, and when we shed light on it, it was the dude we knew.
Yeah.
It was just some person who wanted to mess up the day, but he wasn't even a huge thing, and he's tied up now.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like just the illusion of these sub problems. It's never as serious as our ultimate
Right.
problem, which is that we're gonna die.
And then I always tell people that, you know, fears aren't irrational. There's a reason we're afraid of these things, right? But at the same time, think of it how you're putting it, maybe all fears are irrational other than this journey ending. Because we know that we're capable of overcoming the vast majority of these things we're faced with.
Yeah.
Simply because we have seen other people overcome these things, or we've heard of other people overcoming these things. It's very rare that we go through a life experience that nobody else has ever experienced. But we do feel like, oh, nobody knows what I'm going through. Like, this is the hardest thing ever. And it's very easy to get in that mindset. But really, it's just one obstacle after another. And, you know, it might look like it's a higher obstacle, but really they're all one and the same. It's just how you're going to approach them.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. You know, just seeing that a problem's a problem.
A problem's a problem.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just got to tackle it.
Yeah.
Problem's a problem.
And we, historically, as human beings, are problem solvers, right? Like, we've been doing that. That's the message through every civilization that you go back through is you're watching problem solvers. That's why the Egyptians are trying to put down their hieroglyphs, because they're like, fam, we solve problems. And we're trying to communicate to you that we knew how to solve our problems. And all these cultures keep trying to say, like, we solve problems, like,
Yeah.
face your problem.
Yeah.
And if someone's lacking purpose, I mean, I think that's an easy way to tell them, like, your purpose is to solve a problem. You just got to figure out what problem you're going to solve.
Man,
Yeah.
that's real.
Yeah. Now, I would counter that in suggesting that there are, some problems that are more or less difficult than others.
Oh, yeah.
The problem of life attainment in contrast to the problem of, or life understanding in contrast to the problem of understanding a failed test, basically.
The thing that really matters compared to the thing that you could do again.
Yeah, I think people are a lot more receptive to the healing process when it's getting a bad grade on a test, in contrast to losing a loved one.
Oh, yeah.
So.
For sure. If they're
But
healthy,
if you can
I don't want to throw a wrench in it.
I think if you can, and this is a point in my book, if you can deal with life and its general, from the general approach of it, trying to attain it eternally, then all the other problems will be solved.
Mm-hmm.
That's real. That's real.
Yeah, and they've got studies that have been done on life. Where they've taken surveys and they've, rated various stressors in correlation with the situation, in correlation with either death or, success, career success and things like that. And they've, through their measurements, they've identified death or the fear of it, however you're going to conceptualize and develop a perspective on it, is the most difficult situation that people have to deal with, understanding why they've the situation of their loved one.
Mm-hmm. That's real.
Yeah, and I think that developing perspective in anything is one of the most important things you can do. Yeah,
Definitely.
Especially if you really want to find a solution to whatever problem you're trying to face.
Yeah. And Blake, I think the things that you bring here today will help a lot of people just, contemplate, think about their problems and their sub-problems and their overall thing in a more possibly healthy way, or at least a more like linear way, like kind of being able to understand. So, we appreciate you. Do you have any other like closing remarks that you want to make or any last things?
No, I'd just say, this is a good discussion.
Yeah.
I think, a big thing that we're trying to do here is to organize our perspectives well, and I think that we've done that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is it.
Yeah, and I think you guys are doing something pretty good here, man. Real good.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like you guys got all the genius nerd stuff.
We got the ownership, is what he's saying.
Yeah,
true.
We own this production. We run this production. Yeah.
And then outside of that, everything's good, staying on topic, and then branching out appropriately.
Yeah, man, and we'll definitely have you back on. And if you ever are trying to work out thoughts or want to come through and just, hash things out, like use this as that tool. This is what it's for,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So we appreciate you, Blake Jones. Do you have any closing remarks?
No, I appreciate you too, man. It's good to see you. It's been a minute since I've seen you. It's been a minute since we've had a conversation. So I appreciate you, sharing your thoughts and your experiences with us, and being a piece of what we're trying to create here.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, good.
Yeah. So if you enjoyed this episode.
Oh, yes. I almost forgot.
Yes, sir.
You got to you got to subscribe, you got to share with one person, because that's the only way we can continue to grow. And the goal of this is growth. We're going to put ourselves in discomfort, but we know that it's going to result in what we want to see. So like, share, subscribe, easy 3, and we'll see you next week.
Peace.
Peace.
Peace.